there is almost a 0% probability of prices dropping 50% in 2026. We've got a frozen real estate market where sellers are not bending for the most part, buyers are not bending for the most part. What we are likely to see for pricing in 2026. Welcome back to Agent Investor. I'm your host, Tom Caffarella. Could U.S. housing prices drop 50% in 2026? An economist actually predicted this in the past couple of months. It's a big article that came out, big prediction that U.S. housing prices could drop 50% in 2026. On this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about what would have to happen for prices to drop 50%. Is it possible? Could it happen? And also what we think might happen in 2026 and what to consider when building your business in 2026 as a real estate agent. I'm your host of the Agent Investor podcast, Tom Caffarella. We help real estate agents get off the real estate roller coaster so that they can actually avoid stressing out about whether prices might drop 50%. Our goal is to help agents achieve financial freedom so that they never have to consider whether or not they're going to sell enough houses in 2026 or really any year. And we do that by teaching what we call the agent investor model, where we blend being a real estate agent and being a real estate investor to learn more about how to become an agent investor. Watch my on-demand webinar at any time at www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. We'll teach you how to flip homes. We'll teach you how to do it without putting up any of your own money. We'll teach you how to invest in passive assets so that you don't have to stress out about whether 2026 will be a good year. There is a lot of stress and anxiety going into next year because there are a lot of unknowns. And in fact, more so than really in any time that I can remember. I got my real estate license in 2005. And really the last time I feel like there was this much stress and anxiety in the market was probably around that 2007, 2008 era, which, as we all know, saw big changes and big shifts in the real estate market. Could we be there again? Could we be back to that point again? We'll talk about that today. We'll talk about all the variables, all the forces, and whether, like I said in the outset, could prices drop 50%? Could real estate transactions go up or could they go down? How is it going to impact your income? And more importantly, more than anything else, because none of us really have a crystal ball, but more than anything else, how can we control the controllables that impact us? Let's talk about that today. All right, so the article mentioned that they believe real estate prices could fall, in fact, 50% in 2026, which would be by far the biggest drop since we've been recording real estate prices year over year. That would be a much bigger drop than what happened in 2008, 2009 during the financial collapse, the financial calamity that was the 2008, 2009 stock market bubble, real estate bubble, everything. So let's talk about that. So first and foremost, I did say, and I want to be clear about this, and I don't want to avoid directly answering the question, but I have learned the hard way, and I can state for 100% certainty that nobody, and I mean nobody, can tell you with 100% certainty where real estate prices are going to go in 2026. And one of the reasons for that is because there are so many variables and forces at play that all impact one another. Let me just give a simple example. And we all know kind of we're definitely in a little bit of a market shift right now. Well, not a little bit of one. We are in a market shift right now. And one of the things, actually, let me tell you two things that kind of happened in the past 5 years that I would say really few people predicted, and how, making predictions like this is so unpredictable. All right. So 2022, early 2022, we had mortgage rates at three and a half, 4%, right? We had low inflation, right? And at that point, we had low mortgage rates for a long time. And I can remember having a lot of conversations with people that, it seems like inflation is ticking up and it seems like mortgage rates could go up. Maybe mortgage rates get to 4.5%. Maybe mortgage rates get to 5%. But if they do get there, it'll take a long time. We're at most, maybe we get to 5.5% over the course of 2 or 3 years. And then boom, boom. Within 6 months, we were at 8% interest rates. Mortgage rates went up 2.5 times. Okay. I'm just stating how unpredictable things are. And if you were to have told me back in 2022 that mortgage rates would have gone from 3.5% to 8%, I would have told you that prices would have come way down. I mean, in 2022, we had already been talking about real estate prices going up for quite a long time, people having trouble with affordability. And now you're 2.5 timesing what their interest is going to be on a loan. And you know what happened in 2022, 2023, 2024? With those interest rates going up more than double, we actually still got price appreciation. If that doesn't tell you how unpredictable that stuff is, nothing will. Now, let me give you one more example just of the unpredictable nature of all of this stuff. Okay. 2025, we're still in 2025, but as of this recording, I'm recording this December 2nd, 2025. May of 2025, we still had, I mean, we put on over 100 flips a year onto the market. We still had in May of 2025 buyers bidding more than asking, buyers, lining up at open houses, making a ton of offers. Now, if you were to ask me in May, how is the year going to finish out? I would have said the year's going to finish out strong. Prices are going to keep going up. I don't, if you're telling me that unemployment really hasn't changed, if you're telling me that inflation is starting to get under control, if you're telling me that the Federal Reserve is going to drop the federal funds rate and mortgage rates, we're going to get to about 6.25, high fives for certain people, I would have said, well, if in May 2025, buyers are out in droves making offers, why would that change in October or September of 2025 without any real changes in the economy? But here we are, December of 2025. Most of the properties that we're putting on the market right now, yes, they are still getting offers. And yes, we still are getting reasonably good prices. We're not getting overbidding like we had. And in a lot of cases, we are taking offers that are a little bit less than asking. And properties are sitting for a little bit longer. But the most astonishing thing to me in my market, in the New England market, is that you are still getting effectively almost the same amount of buyers showing up to open houses, looking at properties. And they're just kind of like not making the offers, not making as many offers, not making as aggressive of offers as we had. Yet there's really been, like, if you say what changed in those 3 or 4 months, the only thing that's changed is buyer sentiment. Like what buyers think. Buyers believe right now that they should be patient. Well, why? Well, I mean, you can't really give me any logical reason, because you could say 6 months ago, they should have been thinking the same thing. I mean, prices were higher then. In fact, the competition was more intense then. So shouldn't they actually be more aggressive when there's a little bit more inventory, when there's a little bit less other buyers being aggressive? Wouldn't that be the time to buy? So I say all of this to say that anybody that tells you, anybody that makes predictions, yes, if enough predictions are made, certain people are going to be right and certain people are going to be wrong. But let me tell you that anybody who boldly makes a prediction, it is just kind of taking a little bit of a shot in the dark, because there are so many variables. But I don't want to just kind of say, hey, that's it. everything's unpredictable. When you look at economic forecasts, when you look and you say, what do we think is going to happen? Well, you can't just say anything can happen, right? Well, that doesn't help you. Not only does it not help you, it's not really very realistic. Like from my perspective, and I feel I can say this pretty confidently, there is almost a 0% probability of prices dropping 50% in 2026. Reason being is that the economic forces and the things that would need to happen are so unrealistic and so many things would need to happen that it is very highly improbable of it happening. Okay. Just like everything else, an economic forecast is no different than when we plan out our day to day, right? Like when we walk outside and we cross the street today, could something fatal happen? It could, right? So we can't say that it won't happen, right? We can't say that anything will for certain not happen. But what I can say is I feel very safe crossing the street today. I feel comfortable. I bet on it that it's not going to happen. I bet on it that I'm not going to, have a car, come by and take me out, but it could happen. That's the same thing as the 50% drop in prices. You can't say it can happen, but you can say it most likely won't happen. So when forecasting and thinking about planning your business, you cannot know everything, but you can say what are the most probable scenarios and what are the cause and effect relationships of those variables that like, hey, what would happen if mortgage rates went back to 3%? What would happen if unemployment went up to 7%? What would happen if, or what will happen when there is a new Federal Reserve chair, which is going to happen very soon? Okay, so you can say these are the variables, and let's talk through the variables of how they would impact things so that we can then say, because really, what does this all boil down to? I mean, most of us aren't making $1 million bets in the market. We're not putting $2 million on whether or not housing prices will go up or down. As agent investors, we just want to know, like, how is this going to impact me? And more importantly, what do I need to do in my day-to-day life, or maybe make changes or not to my day-to-day life to get and achieve my ultimate goals? Because that's what it's all about, right? Like we get up every day, we work, we put in effort, we build our businesses, and we want to make sure that we are doing the right things so that 5 years into the future, our life can be better. 10 years into the future, even better than that. 15 years into the future, even better and easier for our family and the people that we care about and ourselves. That's what we care about. Like we really, like most of us don't really care that much on exactly any of these variables, but it's like, how does it impact us and what do we need to do? So let's talk about that. All right. So let's first talk about where we're at in the real estate market in 2025. Okay. At the end of the year. Okay. We are still in a low inventory environment. Yeah, we could argue like inventory's ticked up a tiny bit, but we're still super low because we still have that lock-in effect, right? We still have the majority of homeowners with interest rates in the 3s and 4s. Now, as time goes on, and as more people buy homes, and as more people are in a higher interest rate environment, the percentage of people with low rates keeps going down and down and down. But most people right now either have no mortgage or they have a mortgage with a very low interest rate. That creates what we all know as the lock-in effect, which, there are many sellers that we talk to. I mean, we go into over 100 sellers' living rooms on a weekly basis, make them cash offers. We talk to them, and many of them want to sell, but they have a tough time selling because they've got a $2,000 mortgage payment, a $2,500 mortgage payment, what we would consider a lower mortgage payment, And if they sell and they buy something else, now they've got a three, four, $5,000 mortgage payment. Okay. And with inflation having crept up, right? Even though inflation is kind of like lower than it's been, prices have gone up a lot since 2020. I don't have any statistics for you on any individual item. Obviously, you can look it up on your own, but we all know when we go to the grocery store, it feels a lot worse than it felt 5 years ago. So we all know this. Everything costs more than it did 5 years ago. So it's not even just that you sell your house and you get a higher mortgage rate, but everything else also costs more. So there's so many sellers that are still wanting to sell. They have the lock-in effect. On the other side, we have had low inventory for a long time, and buyers have been facing not only high prices, but relatively higher mortgage rates lately. Many buyers right now, many people, especially younger people, and I'm going to say younger, like 25 to 35, what we would call, first time home buyers, I guess, if you want to call it that. I mean, the typical age or the common age for a first time home buyer, a lot of those people can't buy. They can't afford to buy. They went to college, they have student loan debt. A lot of them are in the beginning phases of their career. And now you get super high prices, super high mortgage rates. I mean, it's very common in our market, like the greater Boston market. Somebody has a five, six, $7,000 a month mortgage payment, for a reasonable property. Yeah, you can buy something smaller. You can buy something in a different town. You can buy something further from the city. But a lot of buyers are priced out. And in fact, there's been a lot of articles that have come out recently about the average age of the first time home buyer. And it is getting older and older and older to the point where when we talk about first time home buyers now, I think about the age of people that are more my age. 43 years old, I'm 43, like first time home buyer. Geez, that's crazy that you would have bought. I mean, not that you can buy a home at any age. I mean, if you want to buy a home, your first home at 55, that's great. But many people don't. Many people want to buy their house a lot younger, but they can't. Where are we at in today? We still have inflation higher than we want it to be. It is not, raging like it used to be. Back in 2022, I think we hit over 10%, which means the value of your dollar fell more than 10%. If you had a dollar, it's now worth 90 cents. It can now buy 90 cents worth of stuff. So inflation's higher. Where we're at in the labor market. So there are definitely cracks in the labor market now. Cracks meaning that if you use a website like CNBC or any like Bloomberg or whatever, and you log in every day like I do, and you check the market and you kind of just read up on what's going on, you will see for sure that there are absolutely layoffs happening all the time now. You see these big companies, they're doing layoffs. One could argue what the reasons are. There are many reasons why companies lay off. At the end of the day, the reason most companies are laying off is they need to save money, and in a lot of cases, it's because they're not making the money that they used to. So, the unemployment rate has gone up. It feels like it's increasing and not decreasing. It feels like the labor market is getting a little bit less. I did see an article by Indeed, or they referenced Indeed, that there are fewer job postings than there have been in quite a bit. So again, when we're talking about like predictions, right? I want to go back to a couple of those items as well. Um, it feels like the labor market is going to keep getting worse. Now, that doesn't mean that it can't improve. Doesn't mean that it can't improve, but it feels like it's getting worse right now. Now, where we're at with buyers and sellers, we are at an interesting point where we're kind of at a standstill. And what I mean by that, and this is one of the things where I really bag of agents. Like, you've got to be an agent investor. You have to diversify, and you have to combine being an agent and an investor, because right now buyers and sellers are in a standstill. So I've had many, many flips, and I've had listings, and I've had agents of mine that have had listings where buyers and sellers are in a standoff in a lot of cases, where sellers still want the prices from 6 months ago. Now, buyers, on the other hand, in a lot of cases, a lot of them aren't willing to be reasonable. And I'll just give you, like, I'll talk numbers just as an example. And I'll talk about, like, my flips, right? So let's say that I had a single family property that I was going to put on the market for 399, 900 in May. In May, my anticipation of that property would be that we put the property that I thought was worth 400, or maybe I thought it was worth 410, so I listed a little bit lower. But what was happening in May for that property is that property would get listed. We'd have a pretty busy open house, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 people, depending on the market. You'd say offers are due on Monday or Tuesday or whatever. And ultimately you'd get two or three or four offers, and you'd end up selling that property for 425. And that kind of thing, where you put a property on the market at the right price, it gets bid up a little bit, and it sells almost instantly. That's the environment that we've been in for a while. And when I say buyers and sellers are at a standstill, a lot of times what's happening now is that same property gets listed. And again, maybe I list that 410 property for 399, and you still get 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 people at that open house. And then Monday and Tuesday rolls around, offers are due, and you don't get any offers. Or you get an offer for 325 on a $400,000 house. And so what we're seeing a lot of is we're seeing a lot of buyers in general kind of go in with the mindset like, hey, I'm not buying a property unless I steal it. However, you're also seeing sellers on the other end being like, hey, I'm not going to sell my property at a discount. I'll just take it off the market. So there was a CNBC article where they referenced, and again, I should have more facts and figures here, but I know the gist of what I saw, which is that there have never been more delisted properties than the past few months, of sellers who said, you know what? If the buyers aren't there, that's fine. That's cool. I'll just take it off the market. So we really have, as of right this second, we've got a frozen real estate market where sellers are not bending for the most part. Buyers are not bending for the most part. Some buyers are being reasonable. Some sellers are being reasonable. But in general, I would personally kind of look at both parties and say they're both kind of being unreasonable. Now, how does that impact agents, and why do you need to become an agent investor? Well, taking a listing now is no guarantee anymore that you're going to make money. I mean, from 2015 to the beginning of 2025, you get a listing, you price it right, you can practically guarantee that's going to be money in the bank. That is changing now, right? That is changing now. Your seller could be reasonable. They could put a $400,000 property on the market at 390, and maybe they're willing to take 380, and then the buyer comes in at 310. So you just have this big gap, and then all of a sudden your seller is telling you, hey, maybe we're not going to sell anymore, or we'll list it in the spring, right? How many sellers are telling their agents right now, hey, we'll list in the spring? Well, that leads us into, well, what happens in the spring? What happens in February, March, April, May, June? What happens? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. We're still talking about what's going on right now. So who's going to crack first, right? So here are the forces to kind of consider. And like I said in the beginning, this is what kind of makes everything challenging. But if you're hearing what I'm saying right now, and you feel like, geez, like I have had a listing and it didn't sell. And I thought it would be guaranteed income. And maybe I'm working with a buyer right now, and my buyer is just being completely unreasonable. You might have a buyer right now. I've seen this even on a couple of our flips where we take 10 off of asking, then they go and they have an inspection. Now they want 100 off of asking. So you're seeing a lot of unreasonableness on both sides. So if you're an agent and you're thinking, okay, like what can I do? Truthfully, the number one thing that I believe you can do is to become an agent investor, right? And learn about that by going to my on-demand webinar at www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. We teach agents how to earn passive income. We teach agents how to partner with us on flips, all without really doing anything extra. That's kind of the key about being an agent investor. You're not adding extra tasks to your plate. We're teaching and training agents on how to do all of this stuff, really how to diversify your income. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. How do you diversify your income so that you're still doing really well? You're still selling a number of your houses, but you're also earning additional income through flips and passive income without adding any additional time. And again, you can learn how to do that by going to www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. So, we've talked about where we're at. We're talking about how things are unpredictable. Now, I don't want to paint the picture that like everything's doom and gloom. I'm more painting the picture that there is legitimate uncertainty that cannot be guaranteed, right? So what are the things that could happen? Because again, I can guarantee you that somebody is telling you right now that you could have a banner year in 2026, that real estate agents are going to crush it in 2026. They're going to kick butt in 2026. And I'm here to tell you that that could happen. That could happen. But why not diversify your income? Like, why hope that the variables are going to change in your favor? Why not force them to happen? So factors to consider in early 2026. What's going to be the seller and buyer mindset? Buyers feel like buyers and sellers, they're both being super patient right now. Who's going to crack first? And what's going to happen? That seller who took their property off the market and said, we're going to list in the spring. Are they definitely going to list in the spring? Is there going to be a flood of inventory that comes onto the market in the spring? And what are buyers going to do if there is? Or are these buyers who think they're going to get crazy good deals? Did they come to the point where they're like, I really want to buy a house. I'm sick of playing these games. Another variable, mortgage rates. Where are mortgage rates headed? Huge impact, right? It's funny. There's a lot of buyers that are waiting on the sidelines right now that are saying, I know mortgage rates are going to come down. I will wait until then. It's kind of an ironic thing because it's probably the worst advice that they could give themselves. Because what's the best advice that they could get right now? If we knew today that mortgage rates are going to go from, call it 6% today to 4.5%, the best advice they could get today is find the property that you love, buy it, and then refi it. Because their advice that a lot of them are giving to themselves, and sometimes even agents are giving them this bad advice. What do you think is going to happen if mortgage rates go down to 4.5% overnight? Well, it's a funny thing because what I can guarantee would happen. Mortgage rates went down to 4.25% tomorrow. You would have buyers rushing in. So what happens when buyers rush in? More demand, higher prices. Now, they're getting the better rate, but now they have higher prices. Whereas today, they could have had a lower price and get the better rate when the better rate becomes available. It's ironic. It's kind of like what they think a lot of times is common sense is going to bite them, could bite them. All right, so what's going to happen with inflation? Again, a lot of predictions there. Cause and effect, right? If inflation goes up and continues to go up, let's say inflation goes to 5%, now the Federal Reserve will not be able to decrease rates. They may actually need to increase rates. So, what happens if mortgage rates now in an already cold environment go up to 7.5%? I'm not predicting this, I'm just postulating here. Okay. What's going to happen with employment and wages? I already talked about that. I believe that we're probably I believe that the job market's going to get a little worse. I believe that unemployment's going to tick up. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate. Their dual mandate, like the two things they're responsible for, they don't have full control over this, but when they raise or lower interest rates, they're both trying to keep low inflation, which they have said they want 2% or under. And they also want high employment or low unemployment, same thing, right? So if employment gets worse, if unemployment goes up, then there's going to be more pressure to get rates down. We also have another big variable that's going to happen really soon, and it might even be announced before the end of the day today. It's probably going to be announced soon. The current Fed chairperson, okay, is going to be replaced. His term runs out, Jerome Powell. His term is running out in early 2026. It is an almost guaranteed foregone conclusion that he will be replaced by somebody that President Trump appoints. Now, President Trump, whether you like him, whether you hate him, he has been very vocal. He wants lower interest rates. Appointing a Federal Reserve chair that you like doesn't guarantee that you're going to get lower rates for a lot of different reasons. One of which is that there's a whole group of Fed Reserve governors that vote. So even if you interviewed somebody and they say, we want lower rates, then you've got a whole other collection of people because there are checks and balances there. It is not a one-person decision. So President Trump wants lower rates. He could put in somebody that says that they want lower rates. And then if everybody else on the board says they don't want lower rates, then it won't happen. Okay. So other variables to consider. Other variables. So there is pent up demand on both the buyer and seller side. There's two types of pent up demand that I want to talk about. The first is pent up buyer demand. I referenced it, recently. I referenced it in this conversation. There are absolutely a ton of buyers on the sideline who want to own a home, but are having trouble affording it. And there is demand there. The demand is not necessarily at these prices and these rates, but the demand will be there if monthly payments get lower. And actually, President Trump floated out a 40-year mortgage as a possibility to get mortgages more affordable. I know that that's a hot button topic. I'm not going to go too much into the 40-year mortgage right now, other than to say that it doesn't really have a major impact on monthly affordability. It's a small difference. It makes it a little bit cheaper. So that's not really going to move the needle all that much, regardless. And there's also pent up demand for people selling, right? So you've got a lot of pent up demand for people that want to sell. They have a 3% rate. They're not going to give up their 3% rate to get a 6% rate because they can't afford it. So there's a lot of pent up demand both ways. So there are a lot of possibilities that could happen. And I open this with could there be a 50% drop in prices like the economist mentioned? And the reason that there's almost a 0% probability of that because of what it would take. And what it would take would be an extreme imbalance of people that not want to sell, but need to sell, and buyers and not being as much buyers. Now, the last time that we had, just in general, real estate prices typically don't fall. There haven't been that many years since we've been tracking this that real estate prices fall, but they have fallen. And the years that they've fallen the most, 2008, 2009, 2010, that kind of era. So why do they fall? We talked about supply and demand. How could there be a whole lot of supply where the sellers need to sell? What happened in 2008, 2009, 2010? The answer is foreclosures. So if there were a whole bunch of foreclosures, and there is a possibility foreclosures are ticking up. But here's the thing, why can it, or why is it highly improbable that it'll happen in 2026? Because it takes a long time to foreclose on a property, especially where we live, especially where I live in New England. From the day that somebody stops making a mortgage payment until the bank takes the property back, and then they take it back, and then they have to put it on the market, and then they have to sell it, that's like a 3-year window. Legitimately. I know for some people that might sound crazy, but if you stop paying your mortgage today, it's going to be like 2 years before the bank buys it back. And then they go through a process, a long process, unfortunately, of getting that property onto the market. So what I will say is, like, once you start seeing a lot of foreclosure, or you start to see foreclosures on the market, like bank-owned properties. And we saw this. Like I went through this in the early phases of my career. When you start seeing bank-owned signs, foreclosures and whatnot, now we can start talking about bigger drops. Until then, what we are likely to see for pricing in 2026. And I know this isn't an exciting prediction, but what we're likely to see is plus or minus 5%. It's what we're likely to see. Like, if all of the variables, if mortgage rates go down and employment stays pretty good and whatnot, like, you can expect prices might even, they might even go up in 26. However, you start to see the reverse. Inflation goes up and mortgage rates go up and unemployment goes up a little bit. And now you're starting to talk about an environment where we could lose 2 or 3 or 4 or 5%. So, this all goes back to the beginning where it's like, predictions are fun. It's fun to talk about the stuff. It's one of my favorite topics. It's like a cool, like, hey, let's grab a glass of bourbon and sit down and talk about all the possibilities. And it is a fun, exciting, intellectual conversation that's cool to talk about. But I've made the point before, I'll make it again, and I can't stress this enough. It's not about like necessarily what's going to happen. It's what action you should take based on what you think is going to happen. Because at the end of the day, like I said, these are all fun topics and we're all speculators in this, and we all kind of like to know the future. Everyone would like to know the future, right? But what can we do? Like, what action can we take? And again, to me, when there's uncertainty, and there's always going to be uncertainty in the market, there's always going to be uncertainty in the real estate market, there's always going to be uncertainty as being a self-employed individual. You get a lot of uncertainty there. And if you're self-employed, like all of these listeners, like all of you guys, your agents, you're self-employed, you have a higher risk tolerance than most people. But you should still diversify your income. You should still be looking for fix and flip opportunities and partnering with us. You should still be buying long-term passive assets. You don't need to have any money in order to do that. We teach you how to do that. We also teach you how to make the big chunks of income by partnering with us so that you can use those for down payments, right? You do a partner deal with us, you find the fix and flip, the average profit is $80,000. We split that 50-50. You get $40,000. You do a couple of those. Now you've got a down payment for your asset. Now you turned the conversation of, well, I don't have the money to invest. Now I do. Now I've got 80 grand. Now I've got 100 grand. Now I've got 60 grand, whatever it is that you earn by partnering with us. That's found money. That's money that you wouldn't have had, right? So most agents think, well, that sounds cool, but I haven't come across a deal to flip. Well, that's what we teach you on my on-demand webinar. Go to www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. Take the time. Like if you're listening to this, tune into that. If you thought, you got some value out of listening to what I had to say today, tune into that. Go to www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. Let 2026 be a year of action for you, right? Diversify your income. Be a little bit safer. Be a little bit smarter in what you do. Guys, I want to thank you for tuning in today. I love talking about predictions, but I'd love to help you guys diversify your income and actually have a safer source of income. Thank you for tuning in. www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com.